This is the story of Valentinian I, a management genius, or a man who just set his partner up to fail. A masterclass in the dangers of the collab. We'll talk about the emperor who actually did this collab. Valentinian I was a brilliant, hard-working ruler, but he was also consumed by toxic rage. And in 375 AD, he died by literally screaming at his critics until he had a stroke. You've just been handed the entire Roman Empire. You've won. What's your first move? Will you split that empire in half and give the harder, more dangerous part to your unqualified little brother? He blinded the child of Jovian by melting his left eye to eliminate the threat to his throne. Hey everyone, welcome to Czar and Truth. I'm Czar. This is the channel where we expose hypocrisy and uncover the truth. If that sounds like something you're passionate about, please subscribe and click the bell so you never miss an analysis. Your comments and shares are what drive this conversation. So as you're watching, let me know your thoughts. Okay, let's begin. Friends, Valentinian I's early life was the complete opposite of the emperors who came before him. He was not a philosopher prince like Julian or a palace-born royal like Constantius II. He was a tough, uncultured soldier from a new money military family on the rough frontier of the empire. If we observe Valentinian's family, it was not old aristocracy. His father was the famous Gratianus Major, Gratian the Elder, a Pannonian brawler who had earned his family's high status through sheer muscle and military skill. Father Gratian was a common soldier from Stabilization, Pannonia, modern-day Croatia, who became a legend. He was famous for his immense physical strength and was nicknamed Funarius, the rope man, because he could reportedly outpull 5 men in a tug-of-war. He rose from the lowest ranks to become a top general, comes, and was granted a large estate, making his family wealthy and respected in military circles. Dear friends, so was the mother. Her name is unknown, as is common for non-imperial women of the era. Only one brother, Valentinian, was the older brother of Valens, who was also a soldier. When Valentinian became emperor, he would make Valens his co-emperor, giving him the eastern half of the empire to rule. Born in 321 AD, he grew up in the heavily militarized province of Pannonia. His world was not one of libraries and philosophers, it was one of army barracks, training yards, and the constant threat of barbarian raids. He was uncultured by Roman aristocratic standards and proud of it. Friends, that mean he was a practical, straightforward man who spoke blunt Latin. He was suspicious of soft intellectuals, senators, and the complex, eunuch-filled court of his predecessor, Constantius II. He inherited his father's impressive physique. He was tall, strong, and a natural soldier. His entire life was the army. He joined as a young man and served as an officer under both Constantius II and Julian. His career was solid but unremarkable until one famous, though possibly exaggerated, incident under Julian the Apostate. As a devout Nicene Christian, Valentinian was serving as a guard when Emperor Julian, a pagan, entered a pagan temple. A temple priest sprinkled holy water, and a few drops landed on Valentinian's cloak. Disgusted, Valentinian publicly punched the priest in the face and ripped off the polluted part of his uniform. Julian, enraged by this act of intolerance, exiled him to a remote military post. This difficulty was a career-ending disaster under Julian, but it became his greatest asset after Julian's death. When the army was looking for a new leader after Jovian, they remembered Valentinian, the tough, uncompromising Christian general who had openly defied the apostate. It made him the perfect candidate. Ever read a comment so bad it makes you want to explode? Friend, we are talking about the Roman emperor who actually did. He was a brilliant, hard-working, successful ruler, but he was also consumed by toxic rage, and in 375 AD, he died by literally screaming at his critics until he had a stroke. This is the ultimate story of Valentinian I. Friends, in the last episode, we just covered the accidental emperor, Jovian, who died in a tent from a charcoal fire. His death in 364 AD left the Roman Empire, once again, in a panic. The army needed a new leader. They didn't want another philosopher like Julian or another like Jovian. They needed a tough, reliable, no-nonsense soldier. They chose this man, Flavius Valentinianus. Valentinian was the definition of old school. He was born in Pannonia, modern-day Croatia, the son of a famous brawling general. He wasn't a soft aristocrat from Rome. He was a barracks man from the frontier, as I mentioned earlier. And he had a famous reputation. He was a devout Orthodox Christian. So devout, in fact, that his career had been canceled just a few years earlier. In exile, this act of loyalty to Christianity should have ended his career. But after Julian died and the pagan rebrand failed, the Christian army remembered. They remembered the one general who had the courage to defy the apostate. So in 364 AD, the army committee, leaderless and desperate, chose Valentinian. He was the tough, reliable, and Christian choice. He got the throne not just because he was a good soldier, but because he was the most famously on-brand Christian general they had. Valentinian has just been handed the entire Roman Empire. He's won. What's his first move? He splits it in half. This was his first and most remarkable decision. He looked at the empire crumbling on the Rhine, the Danube, and in the east and made a brilliant executive decision. The empire was ungovernable by a single man. So he did the ultimate collab. He appointed a co-emperor. But he didn't pick a rival general he'd have to murder later. He picked someone he thought he could control, his younger, less qualified brother, Valens. And here's the kicker. Dear friends, Valentinian, the superior general, kept the west, the half that was poorer but more stable. He gave his brother Valens the east, the half with the cities, the wealth, and the single greatest military threat on earth, the Persian Empire. Was this a genius move in delegation, or was he just setting his little brother up to fail? Although friends some historians agreed that he didn't have time to think about it, he had a border to fix. Valentinian's reign was not glorious adventures. It was about the grind. He was a workhorse emperor. For his entire 11-year reign, he didn't sit in a palace. He lived in a military tent on the frontier, primarily along the Rhine and Danube rivers. His one great achievement was securing the borders. He was a fortress builder. He waged ruthless, defensive campaigns against the Germanic tribes, the Alemanni, the Quadi, beating them back and then building hundreds of miles of new forts and walls. He was the one who understood that you don't grow by going easy. You grow by building a solid foundation and defending your territories. His other great achievement was social. He was famously called the defender of the poor. In Latin we say, defensor plebis. He passed laws to provide public doctors for the poor in Rome and protected farmers from corrupt tax collectors and wealthy landowners. He was a brute, but he was a fair brute. He was also a champion of religious toleration. Unlike his predecessors who waged religious civil wars, Valentinian's policy was simple. I don't care how you worship, as long as you pay your taxes and obey the law. We can call it friends. He tried to create multi-religion society based on being only Roman. He built the walls. He protected the poor. He ended the religious wars. He was by all accounts one of the last great Western Roman emperors. But he had one fatal flaw. Valentinian's greatest defeat wasn't a battle. It was his own personality. Dear friends, he was a brilliant, hard-working ruler, but he was also consumed by a toxic, uncontrollable rage. He was the ultimate perfectionist. When his staff failed, he was famously cruel. He executed officials for minor mistakes. He even kept two pet bears named Innocence and Golden Mane, which he allegedly used to maul prisoners he disliked. This was a man on the edge. This was an emperor on the verge of a total, catastrophic burnout. In 375 AD, his burnout finally came. Valentinian was on the Danube frontier, negotiating with envoys from a barbarian tribe called the Quadi. The envoys were insolent. They made excuses for their raids and then arrogantly claimed that the Roman forts were not good enough to stop them. For Valentinian, who had spent his entire reign building those forts, this was the ultimate hate comment. He didn't just get mad, he exploded. The historian Ammianus Marcellinus describes it perfectly. Valentinian fell into a violent fit of rage, screaming at the envoys, threatening to destroy their entire nation. He screamed so hard with so much fury that he burst a blood vessel in his brain and collapsed. He had a massive, fatal stroke. He died literally from screaming. This was his only defeat, his own rage, the ultimate burnout. The workhorse emperor had worked himself to death. So friends, who was Valentinian? He was the last great builder of the West. He secured the borders, protected the poor, and in a rare act of genius, split the empire in two. But he is also the ultimate warning. This is the story of the emperor who was so obsessed with the grind, so consumed by passion and rage, that he self-destructs. He didn't live to see the consequences of his decisions. Just 3 years after his death, his brother Valens, the man he'd put in charge of the East, would lead the Roman army to its single worst defeat in 400 years at the Battle of Adrianople, an event that would crack the empire open and begin its final fall. Now, if we look at his personal life, Valentinian I had 2 wives and 3 known children, including 2 sons who became his heirs. His sudden death in 375 AD resulted in an immediate succession crisis, not from a lack of heirs, but from an unexpected power grab by his army on the frontier. Valentinian I's family was central to his plan for a stable dynasty, his brother Valens. As we know, Valentinian's first act as emperor was to appoint his brother Valens as co-emperor, giving him the eastern half of the empire to rule. His first wife was Marina Severa Erwan. Gratian, born circa 359 AD, this was his eldest son and designated heir. To secure the dynasty, Valentinian had already proclaimed the young Gratian as co-Augustus, co-emperor, in 367 AD. By the time Valentinian died, Gratian was 16 and already a ruling emperor. His second wife was Justina, had heir to Valentinian II, born 371 AD. His second son was just a 4-year-old child living in an imperial villa on the Danube when his father died. He also had 3 daughters with Justina, Justa, Grata, and Galla, who would later be used for political marriages. We know, friends, in those days communication was not that fast as today. Valentinian I died of a stroke on November 17, 375 AD, in Pannonia, modern-day Hungary, while screaming at barbarian envoys. His designated heir, Gratian, was far away in Trier, Germany. His other co-emperor, Valens, was in the east. This left the army on the Danube frontier leaderless and panicked. They were terrified that another general in a different province would proclaim himself emperor, starting a civil war. To prevent this, Valentinian's generals took matters into their own hands in a brilliant and risky political move. Just 5 days after Valentinian's death, his top generals, including Marabouts, went to the nearby villa where Valentinian's 4-year-old son, Valentinian II, was living with his mother, Justina. They brought the child to the military camp, lifted him on a shield, and proclaimed him the new Augustus, co-emperor. Dear friends, the motive was not an act of love for the child. It was a cold political calculation. By creating a new emperor on the spot, the generals actually secured their own authority as the power behind the throne, prevented any other general from Gaul or East, showed loyalty to the dynasty, preempting any anger from Gratian. The result was Gratian, back in Trier, was furious that a 4-year-old had been made his equal without his permission, but he was powerless to stop it. The Roman world was now, for the first time, officially and uneasily ruled by 3 legitimate emperors. Valens, Valentinian's brother, in the east. Gratian, Valentinian's 16-year-old son, in the west, ruling from Germany, Gaul. Valentinian II, Valentinian's 4-year-old son, in the middle, ruling in name from Italy, Pannonia. Here we talk about Valentinian I founded a new powerful dynasty known as the Valentinianic dynasty. His rise to power in 364 AD marked a complete break from the previous Constantinian dynasty, which had ended with Julian's death in 363 AD and the brief 8-month reign of the accidental emperor Jovian. Why we called it today Valentinianic dynasty? Because Valentinian was a Pannonian from modern-day Croatia, military officer, the son of a general named Gratian the Elder. He was chosen by the army for his military experience and Christian faith, not for any blood relation to past emperors. He immediately secured his new dynasty by sharing power with his own family. Valentinian I, 364 to 375. The founder ruled the Western Empire. Valens, 364 to 378. His brother, whom he appointed as emperor of the Eastern Empire. Gratian, 367 to 383. His first son, whom he made co-emperor of the West. Valentinian II, 375 to 392. His second son, who was proclaimed emperor as a child after his father's death. This dynasty's bloodline also continued by linking to the next, as Valentinian's daughter, Galla, married the future emperor Theodosius. Friends Roman historians, especially the great contemporary historian Ammianus Marcellinus, judged the era of Valentinian I as deeply divided. They saw him as an excellent and effective emperor in his public duties, but a terrifying and brutal man in his personal conduct. In short, they viewed him as one of the last great Roman emperors, but also as a savage monster, a term Ammianus used. His reign was seen as a success for the stability of the empire, but a reign of terror for his own court and officials. Valentinian spent his entire 11-year reign living in a military tent on the frontiers of the Rhine and Danube. His greatest achievement was the complete restoration of the German frontier. He personally led campaigns, defeated the Alemanni and other tribes, and then oversaw a massive building project, constructing hundreds of forts and watchtowers. Ammianus praised this tireless, unglamorous work as essential for the empire's survival. Ammianus, a pagan, deeply praised Valentinian's religious policy. At a time when his brother Valens, in the east, was waging a bitter civil war against different Christian sects, Valentinian declared full religious toleration in the west. He allowed pagans to worship, Jews to practice their faith, and, most famously, he refused to get involved in the fights between different Christian bishops. He was seen as a force for stability and moderation. While historians praised the emperor, they feared the man. Ammianus's history is filled with shocking stories of Valentinian's personal brutality. The emperor's most famous trait was his uncontrollable, violent temper. Ammianus describes him as a savage monster when angered. Roman historians saw Valentinian I as a tragic contradiction, a brilliant general and a just administrator for the poor, but also a cruel, paranoid, and terrifying tyrant in his personal life. He was the right man to defend the empire, but a monster to serve. This is Czar from Czar and Truth, and I want to thank you for watching. If you believe in this channel's mission to uncover the truth, the best way to support it is to engage. Every comment, every share, and every new subscription tells YouTube that these conversations are important and helps them reach more people. Thank you for your incredible support.